I want to welcome you to Testimony Time today, and I'm delighted to say that in the studio with me is Paulette Monteiro. Paulette, lovely to have you with us today. Thank you for coming and joining us.
Thank you for having me here, Gordon.
Well, when you wrote to us and said you'd love to have an opportunity of giving your testimony, you wrote and you said, "My life experiences are a testimony to God's glory and redeeming power." You said, "It's taken me some time to get it all together, but I got there in the end." So as you come and you share your story with us today, Paulette, what are you wanting to achieve?
What I'm wanting to achieve is for someone to understand that no matter what the beginning of their life is, the past, their past, doesn't define the future, and that with God, anything is possible. He can take us from a rough past and just bring it out and make us come into a glorious, glorious present and an even more glorious future.
Okay, well, we pray for that for you. And it's been quite a rough past for you, hasn't it? And some of the topics that we're going to deal with today are going to be difficult topics. And I just want to say to those of you at home today, some of the things, if we get them out in Paulette's story, are talking about a broken home, about a mum who died fairly early on, about suicidal tendencies, about sexual abuse as a child, about domestic violence, and the list goes on. And these may be subjects that you've got no experience of, but it'd be good for you to listen to Paulette. And some of you may be going through some of those things, and you may find helpful what we're going to share. So, Paulette, let me start by saying your birth country is France, your family country is the Congo, and now you live in the UK. So where's home for you?
Home is where the heart is, I would say. I would say the UK for now.
Okay, and you came here, you were how old?
I was 19 when I came to the UK.
All right. So you started off your life in France?
I started my life in France. I lived in Congo, so yes.
Bit of traveling.
Yes, indeed.
On the plains. So tell us a little bit about your early childhood.
So from what I can remember and my memories, my earlier memories are when I was 5 years old. And I just remember arriving in Congo. That's my first ever memory. I don't remember how I got there, probably the plane, I'm sure it was the plane. But I remember, just being dropped off with with our grandmother, who raised us for about 3 years. My mom used to come and go, so she wasn't staying with us in Congo. So my grandmother raised us for 3 years. Then when we moved back to France, I just remember being in foster homes after, coming from the Congo. So it has been foster homes, foster families. We will see our moms here and there. So she had weekend visitations, and we were allowed to come out of the foster homes during weekends and obviously spend time with her.
Because all the way through, right up to the end of your teen years, really, there was no dad in your life, was there?
No, there wasn't a dad in my life. Though I seen pictures, I do not recall my past with my dad. And from what he tells me, the last time he saw me, I was 3 years old.
Okay. Now, you've written a book which tells your story, and I've had the opportunity of reading it, Behind the Smile. That says that there's things going on behind that beautiful smile that you've got, which really have been pretty difficult and horrible to deal with. When you're looking back to your early childhood, you talk about racial issues, you talk about being in a foster care, you talk about sexual abuse and some of those issues like that. We don't want to go into too much detail, but just unpack that a little bit for us, can you?
So growing up as a young child, I grew up a bit here and there, but the most of my childhood seems to have spent in Lille, which is the north of France, where we used to be in a foster home. It was pretty much, a kind of a white community. So I remember being, 2 or 3 black children in school. So it was a bit difficult to identify, but I didn't mind this guy. I was used to living in foster homes with foster parents being white. So I didn't see any issue in that. But in school, I was teased a lot about, my nose, about my lips, my teeth. Children wouldn't want to to hold my hand, you know, when you pair us up to go to school trips. I remember clearly someone not wanting to touch my hand. I would say this has left an impact which I didn't realize until later on. You know, I didn't see it as racism for some reason. Maybe I didn't understand. I just thought, oh, okay. So I just went on, obviously, with carrying quite a few complex and insecurities after that. You know, I remember wishing that, you know, I would be a different color, or my nose would be, you know, a bit smaller, my lips would be a bit thinner. So all this complex came, but afterwards, it didn't happen at that time. It's as I grew older, I thought, why not change?
I mean, we look at our country today, and racism is something that's constantly in the news and is talked about. You clearly have come through it. I don't know whether you'd say you still got it as an issue, but how do you cope with it? Or how have you coped with it?
Well, at the time, I don't think I coped with it the right way, because obviously it created a lot of insecurities. And so at the time, obviously, with very little understanding of what racism was, I just tried, obviously, to blend in, if I can say that, but it's very difficult to blend in. I tried to blend in, but now, as I stand here as a woman, I think being anchored in my identity and understanding the need for each and every single one of us to be different, I appreciate the way I look. I appreciate the way my nose is, my lips are. You know, I appreciate everything about me, and now it's obviously, for me, I use it as a uniqueness. I think it's a great thing to be unique. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's helpful, because I'm sure there are people who are watching who are struggling with their identity in all sorts of different ways. So it's interesting to know how you've dealt with it. Well, here you are. You're growing up in France, and you're spending some of your time in the Congo. You're missing out on that family relationship because of the time that you spent in foster homes. Now, both those countries are French-speaking.
Yes.
So why would you come to an English-speaking country?
So when my mom passed away, I got to meet my dad. For me, obviously, I would say it's the first time, which for him obviously wasn't. And he lived in London. And when I got my diploma after what we would call high school in France, I started working, and it wasn't a great work for 18-year-old to start working in this sort of I was working in an elderly people's home. And I was probably the youngest person there. So I remembered, at one point, my dad, wishing for me to come and live with him. And that's how, I made my decision and came to live in London.
All right. You said a sentence there, which you just almost said casually. You said, when my mum died, and you were, I think about 13 years old. That must have been trauma for you. And you had one sister, was it?
At the time, I had all my three sisters.
Three sisters, yes. Okay. But I mean, that must have been traumatic for you. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, sure. So when my mom passed away, just as you said, I was 13 years old. She has just managed to take us out of the care system. So we were very hopeful that, finally we will get to live with our mom. And it was I remember just being so happy when she came to pick us up, and it was a thing of just pack everything because you're not coming back. So I think my big sister and I, we were very, very happy because obviously of the childhood we've had. So we were really looking forward to not only living with her, but getting to know her on a daily basis, because when we used to see her, it was, every fortnight, so it wasn't much bonding there. So we lived with her, I would say 6 months from what I can recall, from October 1996 until she passed, so that was April 97. It was a shock, and I don't think at the time I realized how much of an impact he had played on me.
Did you know that she was ill? I mean, was she ill during that period of time and really was dying and you didn't know? Or?
That's it. So she had been unwell, in and out of hospitals, but not all the time. But when she would go, she would always come back. So the day she left, for me, it was just another of a hospital. She will come back. So that's what was on my mind. So I just remember coming back from school. My big sister, was on the phone calling the ambulance service. And then I knew it was about my mom. So I went to see her in the bedroom, and she was lying on the bed, and I can't remember if she was even conscious, but I just looked at her, and I think I just shut down, and I just went and looked at her, and then I went back to the living room and started watching my daily program, thinking that, oh, she will go and she will come back. And you know, she didn't come back from the hospital. Yes.
We talk a lot about children having a settled childhood, and that's what makes them secure. Your childhood was anything but settled because of your time in France, your time in the Congo, your time with your mum and your grandmother and into homes. Do you look back on your childhood and think it was a happy time, or would you describe it in some other way?
I would say as a child, you know, being in foster care, and I don't know how the system is in the UK with foster care, but I don't know, saying I had a good childhood is, I don't think I had a good childhood, but I had good moments. Definitely my foster parents, I've always been good. From different foster parents that I've had, they've always been very, very good, loving, caring. We were included in their family. There was no difference between their own children and us. And I really appreciated that. When I look back, I said, ooh. And even at times we were favored. So I would say I had I do have happy memories, but I do have memories that are quite painful as well. There's a balance, but I think the painful memories are probably high on the scale.
Okay. And as you look back at that time, you talk about it being a Christian family. Did God play a part in your life as a child?
Honestly, no. I wasn't connected with God at the time, no.
Right. And did you go to church, to the local Catholic church or whatever it was in France and the Congo?
So I remember attending Catholic church. I can't remember how old I was. It's just a phased memory. I do remember going through, you know, Holy Communion and all that. So I do remember this bit. I can't remember how old I was. My uncle in France, my great uncle, is a pastor. So I do remember attending church on a regular basis, being, I would say, forced to sing in a choir because I don't believe I've got the voice. I've been blessed in that department. So I was singing in the church, attending church, but the connection with God just wasn't there.
Okay. Well, you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to ask you to sing today, so you're all right on that.
Thank you.
Paulette, I mean, here you are, your mum died at 13, and you've already told us you came to the UK when you were 19. So what happened in that intervening 6 years?
So within those 6 years, when my mum passed away, my mum would have wished for us to go back into the foster care system because she wanted to make sure that we will all be together. The family decided otherwise and they split us up. So there's 4 of us. I've got a big sister and I'm the second born. And then I've got 2 other sisters. So the way they split us was me and the last born, and then my big sister with the one that comes straight after me. We were separated. For me, that was quite a traumatic because I've always been with my big sister. So no matter where I was in foster care, in foster home, I've always been with my big sister. And this was the first time we had to separate, and it was quite traumatic. So I went to live with my mum's sister. It was, you know, in the beginning it started well because I was mourning my mum, and obviously you get whatever you want at that age. You know, I would cry and then my aunt will get me, you know, whatever I wanted really to make sure that I was happy. Obviously material things, that would be material things. Then it became a time when I would be crying and then my aunt will, you know, she will shun me. She will tell me to stop crying, you know, that she's gone. I need to, well, she didn't say that explicitly, but to move on, I needed to move on and to stop crying because then I upset my little sister when I'm crying. So I spiraled down in you know, what I believe is depression at 14 years old. Spiraled down into depression, attempted suicide a couple of times. After that, I had to leave the house. So it was quite an event that happened. So my aunt just kicked me out of the house. Then I was brought back into our home, and I decided to refer myself back to a judge to be placed in foster care. Okay,
but at 19, you thought, well, I'm going to try and connect with my dad.
Yes.
You knew where he was. You knew he was in the London area. You came over here. Didn't quite work out the way that you thought it would work out, did it?
No, I mean, you know, my dad has fond memories of me, which, you know, we can understand, but I had no memories of him at all. So it was as if I was living with a stranger, you know, and you know, he would see, the way he used to see me at the time is as the 3-year-old he had left, and I was already 19. So I had my own habits, because I had obviously been, you know, quite independent from a young age. But he will, you know, overpower that and want to give me the love that he thought I needed, and which for me, I didn't know how to receive. So no, it didn't work out, and I went into a hostel.
Well, I mean, and this is where, in a sense, we come to the crux of your story, because you began, here you are, 19, attractive young lady, men attracted to you, but you made all the wrong choices. As I was thinking of questions for today, I wrote down, when I talk to someone like you and about an abusive relationship, to the outsider listening in, it seemed obvious it was the wrong relationship. What causes someone like you to choose men like you did?
Brokenness. Brokenness. The brokenness I had, I didn't see. I didn't see it at the time, that I needed to heal from my past before engaging with, you know, the opposite sex, you know, obviously in a relationship rather than friendship. So the brokenness that I carried didn't make it easy for me to make the right decisions. I was quite, I would say, blinded, or, you know, I went obviously knowing, not knowing the person, but knowing that it wasn't quite right for me to be there.
Just desperate for
yes.
a relationship which you hoped was going to be loving and satisfy the needs that you had. I mean, your relationship or your relationships were pretty brutal, and they were violent. The domestic abuse that you got involved the police. In time, as your children came into your family, they began to experience it all. And yet, as I read your story, and I'm not talking just about you, I'm just talking about women in similar situations, again and again, you went back. Can you help us to understand what's happening?
I mean, for myself, because I can only speak for my personal situation. First, I believed that that's all I deserved. Then I started, obviously, when you are in a relationship with a, you know, such man, they know how to make you feel as if you would not amount to anything without them, and this is how I felt. And then when the child that we had together, obviously we had a child together, it was a lot of, oh, do I want my child to grow up without a father? Because I grew up without a father, and I can see now how that had affected me, and I didn't want it for my child. So I also used, and he also used that as an excuse to keep me in that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you tell one story in your book, which I found very profound, where you say you found a photo of your boyfriend, partner, in a relationship with another woman, and so you put that picture on his screensaver where he'd see it, and you said you knew when he came home he'd be so angry, and you lay in bed terrified, and yet you still allowed him to commute between Birmingham and London with you and going back to his other girlfriend. I think for someone who hasn't experienced what you've experienced, that's so hard to understand.
I think it's a lack of self-esteem. I just put it down to a lack of self-esteem. I didn't think, like I said earlier, I didn't think that I deserved any better. I really thought that this was it, that, you know, I can change him, I can make him commit, surely he will make a decision. And obviously, between his travels, he would just tell me that it's just to go and see the child. So for me, I would say I was naive, but also I chose to not see the truth for what it was. I wanted him to be with me, clearly. I had love for him, but again, you know, for some women, we tend to work on potential. So you see the person's potential, and you see the glimpse of the person, you know, changing, and you're hoping, and that's where sometimes we fail ourselves, because it's clearly not what it is.
All right, but Pauline, the good thing about your story is positive has come out of it and good news has come out of it. Suppose there is somebody watching today who is equally in an abusive situation and doesn't know how to extract themselves and just get into where you've got into. How would you help them?
I would say, first of all, you have to be well surrounded. I think support is essential. I know when sometimes you find yourself in a domestic violence relationship, the person will isolate you. But we see when we are being isolated. So, you know, obviously push through. You have to push through whatever the person is trying to do, and surround yourself with people who obviously will not judge you, but will understand and will be patient. I think it comes down to patience, because I know my own sister was quite disappointed with me every time I would allow the person back. But her patience and her love has helped me to one day make that decision. And obviously she would, you know, always tell me, leave him. And at some point she saw that, okay, I'm going to stop saying that. I'm going to let her realize that this person is actually not good. So for a person finding themselves in such situation, allow people to speak the truth. Don't be so blinded by what we would say is love, because I don't think it is love. At the end of the day, I realized that it wasn't love. It's more, I was loving him out of a place of insecurity, and he was able to see that, and he was able to play with that as well. So support is essential, and definitely go for counseling and speak openly, because even when I was seeking help, I wasn't giving full details, and that's why I wasn't able to be helped to the fullness of the help that I needed.
Being honest as well.
Yes, yeah. Honestly.
And now clearly you're part of a loving church family, a good church, Kensington Temple. Where did your experience of the Lord come into all of this?
So I would say, in that relationship, God spoke to me quite a lot. I was just being disobedient, if I can be honest. Though I wasn't praying as much, as my relationship with God wasn't as much as close as it is now, God was still speaking to me. After I came out of that relationship, I said, I will take God seriously. I have to, because he has obviously saved me. He has given me strength to walk out. I do have to give God a better, you know, a better commitment than I was before. Yes.
And did you have a friend who said, come along with me to church, or did you just go to a church nearby? How did a connection come with Kensington Temple?
So I was always at Kensington Temple, if I can say the word always. I joined Kensington Temple in 2003. First I joined the French satellite, and then in 2010, that's when I went back to what we would say the mother church. So I was attending church even throughout that relationship, and jokingly, I always say I was the one crying the most during worship. And though people would think I was crying because of the worship, I was crying because of my own situation. So I was in church during the time of being abused. I didn't confide in anyone out of shame, out of guilt. I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want people to see me as this victim. Someone is being abused behind closed doors and just comes to church looking, made up. So I didn't. But I started opening up in my cell group. So in Kensington Temple, we have cell groups. I started opening up there, and, the prayers, the encouragement, the support was just really good at the time, yes.
All right. So if somebody is in similar situations to you, what advice would you give them? How would you help? If you were sitting opposite someone who had been through what you'd been, what would you say to them?
First, and I've actually been in a situation like this, I try to understand their past, because there's always a connection with the past as to why you choose the kind of person you go for, if that makes sense, and I may be wrong, but that's how I'm able to understand the person. And then, I try to understand the desire. What actually are you desiring from that relationship? What are you seeing? Is it what you actually desire? So I try to, and you have to be an empath in those situations. Mm-hmm. But I would advise to maybe, at times you have to separate yourself from the person and decide whether or not that is what you really need in your life. And sometimes projecting someone in the next 5 years kind of helps them. If you say in the next 5 years, what do you think will happen? Would the cycle still continue? Do you think in the next 5 years this person is actually showing signs of change? And even sometimes you have to separate yourself from the person in order to allow them to see what they have been doing to you and also to seek change and help for themselves.
Okay. Well, we're in the last 2 or 3 minutes of the program. How do you see the future? I know you've begun to talk about your experiences. I think you even went into a prison once and shared your experience. What's the future hold for you?
For me, I can see that God is using my experience to talk to other women and young women as well. So I see myself doing that, I guess, you know, whether it's in the church, whether it's outside the church, just sharing my experience and empowering other women to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and they are not alone. I think the key thing for me is for people to understand that they are not alone. I felt really alone, and when I opened up, I realized that, oh, there's quite a lot of people going through this.
Okay, and part of the therapy for you was to write your story and to make it available for others, and that's what your book is. Yes. And this is the English version of it, but you've also got a French version of it, is that right?
That's right, yes.
And if somebody wanted to get a copy of it, how would they do that?
So the book is available on Amazon, Amazon.com, Amazon, whichever Amazon, wherever you live, the book is available. You just type Behind a Smile and Paulette Montero, and you'll be able to find it.
And it's great. And I'm sure folks, as they've listened to your story, will say, some folks will say, I want to pray for Paulette. And now you've got 2 children?
Yes.
Have they been affected, do you think? Or are you able to bring them up, nurturing them in the Lord? How have you dealt with it?
So my children have been affected, definitely. So as I came out of that relationship, I referred them for counseling. They have attended counseling, but as the counselor said, sometimes there's after effect that we will not see at the time. So now they are back in doing counseling. My daughter is going through a few of the traumas. She was the oldest one, so she's seen a bit more than what my son has seen. She's having backflash. You know, sometimes she can just be thinking and she has backflash. My son, he has been affected as well, and we had to deal with behavior issues, but they are both doing very well right now. Yes.
Well, I want to say to you, Paulette, Behind the Smile, it's a very appropriate title for your book because there's a lot of things that have happened to you, but also you really can smile now because the Lord has blessed your ministry, and you in fact are even involved in the young people at Kensington Temple, so well done. I've been talking today to Paulette Montero, and you've been listening to her story. If you've been affected, then please just go to the Lord and seek help or ring Revelation TV and we'll try and help you. God bless. Bye-bye.